The Federal and SR Public Welfare Trust present the Pudukkottai Marathon 2025. This event is co-presented by Rupee Apex Group of Companies on Sunday, August 3.
What were the reasons that Pahalgam happened? Was there an intelligence failure? Was there a secondary? What did they achieve? Did they achieve anything new? I do not see them as having come back with any specific gains. Where one single terrorist or Pakistan government or nefarious elements within the Pakistani establishment can start a war between India and Pakistan at any time. No country in the world has found effective solutions for the problem of terrorists.
Hello and welcome to the Federal. I am Nilanjan Mukhopadhyay, your host for Off the Beaten Track. After the Operation Sindoor, India has actually had a major challenge on the diplomatic front. We projected on the domestic front that the Indian forces had been able to achieve their objectives through Operation Sindoor, through the 4 days of Operation Sindoor. Now, the big challenge was to convey this and get the world on our side. Has this actually been a successful exercise or not? This is what we will be trying to discuss today. To help me understand this, the various intricacies, because there are bilateral ties involved, there are multilateral ties involved. So I have a very distinguished person who has been several decades in the Indian Foreign Service. Venu Rajamony, welcome to this program. Venu Rajamony has been in the Foreign Service, or rather was in the Foreign Service from 1986, and he retired as the Indian ambassador in the Netherlands. He also held a very important position as the press secretary to the President of India, that was President Pranab Mukherjee. Very significant years, transiting from the UPA government to the NDA government with Mr. Modi as the Prime Minister. So very important period, and very nice to speak to you after a fairly long gap, Venu Rajamony, and welcome to this program, and thank you very much for joining us on the show. Now, let me ask you by a very direct question, that is it correct to say that the sense that India today stands isolated in the world is possibly a correct one? When they say isolated, things are not going very well. On several bilateral ties are concerned, especially with the US, where we are slowly losing count of the number of times President Trump has commented, and also on bilateral, on multilateral organizations like the BRICS and the SCO. So, is the isolation, as I was saying, is it correct to say that there is actually a deficit as far as getting people in the world on our side?
Nilanjan, as a student, as well as a practitioner or a former practitioner of international relations, I would say that the world is very complex. It has always been complex. It is even more complex. It is even more unpredictable. But it is also a world system where virtually every country, even the smallest of countries, have agency. They don't just listen to what somebody else says and formulate a position. They look at their own interest and they take positions of their own. So, in that sense, to say India is isolated is a very strong term. In international relations, often countries are alone, and countries have to be alone and have to come to terms with being alone when they take strong positions about certain issues. I still remember when we refused to sign the CTBT. Our then permanent representative to the UN, Arundhati Ghosh, said in the UN, I have 1.4 billion people behind me. I don't care if I'm all alone in opposing the CTBT. So that is the attitude India has taken for long, not yesterday or today. And that remains the reality. The problem arises when we domestically, whether it is part of official efforts and propaganda, or whether the media ecosystem constantly demands victories and defeats, and nothing but a total and complete victory for
Hmm.
India in any international engagement. So that is where the problem arises. Uh, is India completely isolated on every issue in the world? Are we like a North Korea? Absolutely not.
No, no.
We are not like that.
Okay.
But has India taken positions on which most other countries do not agree? Yes, that is a reality, and we have to come to terms with that reality. And the ideal situation would be a dialogue, a conversation, a foreign policy debate which takes into account these realities. For example, in the instant case, no country in the world is going to justify or support us in what we did, which is go in and attack Pakistan in response, in retaliation to what happened in Pahalgam. No
Pahalgam.
country has done it, and no country will do it. And all the delegations we send outside, all the conversations we have with world leaders is unlikely to change that much. I'm not aware of even tiny little Bhutan, which has always stood by and supported India, coming out and saying India was right in attacking Pakistan. In contrast, it is important to note that Pakistan had at least two countries which completely stood by it, which was Turkey and Azerbaijan.
China.
It said, and
No,
China, well,
Azerbaijan.
China also,
China,
of
of
course.
course.
Actually, China's was probably a little more diplomatically nuanced dialogue. Once again, like most others, talking in terms of peaceful settlement, talking in terms of dialogue, the need not to escalate the situation. But in whatever I saw in the newspapers, whatever reports I saw, Turkey and Azerbaijan were more open in saying this is wrong, this should not be done. That Indian attack on Pakistan and a challenge to Pakistan's sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Right.
Here, China also repeatedly, more than once, said we stand by Pakistan's sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Right.
So, for India to set itself a goal of getting the world community to endorse our action is an impossible goal. We can never achieve that. We could not have achieved that. In my view, whatever parliament delegations went abroad, the only limited achievement they could have had is to present a pluralistic face of India, to say that the opposition parties, the government, all sections of opinion, all communities, all languages, all are together in opposing terrorism and in condemning terrorism, and that the whatever happened in Pahalgam was a terrible thing that should not happen. So we were able to convey the fact that India stood united in the face of terrorism. But whether the action that we took against Pakistan was right, this is something no other country would formulate an opinion upon. They would all, in general terms, condemn terrorism. They would say, do not escalate the situation. They would say, resolve things through dialogue. But to expect a condemnation is to try and seek the impossible. So the shaping of the narrative in that regard is the most problematic areas, in my opinion. Once again, if I can go back to some of your opening comments, we need to
Yes.
declutter two aspects.
Right.
One, why did India go and attack the so-called militant hideouts in Pakistan? This was to deter Pakistan from supporting terrorism
Right.
and to try and prevent terrorism from attacking India. So that is
Right.
an entirely separate action which had a certain purpose. Have we achieved that purpose? I don't think we have achieved that purpose.
Okay.
Pakistan, in fact, from all that we have seen in news reports, all the statements emanating from them, the promotion of Asim Munir to Field Marshal only seems to
Yes.
be even more emboldened. In
Even
fact,
even more. Yes.
Pakistan sees this whole conflict as a stalemate rather than a victory for India or a victory for Pakistan. In fact, they claim victory by saying we stopped India. We prevented
Right.
India from doing any further damage, and we gave them as good a response as we got. So,
Right.
in any objective analysis from the Indian side, also will have to accept the fact that actually it was a stalemate. There was it ended up as a ceasefire, not as a victory for India by any means. Yes, we demonstrated our capability to go in and attack Pakistani, not just the terrorist hideouts, but in the subsequent round, their air bases, their military targets,
Right.
etc. But still, the conflict has not come to an end. We ourselves have said this is only a pause in hostilities. It is not even a ceasefire.
We say
So,
that we have said that Operation Sindoor is an ongoing operation. That is what
absolutely,
was stated by the Prime Minister in his address to
exactly.
the nation.
So the question arises, what have we achieved out of the action so far? And
Mhm.
when is this pause going to be broken? When is hostilities going to start all
Restart.
over again? And I'm sure both countries are already preparing for the next round of hostilities. Neither
Mm.
side has been deterred from hostilities in any manner. And if India's strategic goal was to prevent more acts of terrorism coming out of Pakistan, there is absolutely no evidence to show that Pakistan has
So
stopped
there
support
have
for
been,
terrorism.
I'll just interrupt, there have been media reports of sightings of very important terrorists in Pakistan. They have been there in the Indian media also, that these people have been seen to be moving around quite freely. So we really have seen evidence of actually no cessation in as far as Pakistan support or doing any action to prevent terrorists from using their territory very openly.
And
I
also,
would, yeah,
we identified four perpetrators of Pahalgam.
right.
We have no evidence that they have been killed or they have been injured or they have been even targeted. So, in that
Right.
sense, the prime perpetrators or even the organization behind them, we still have seen no evidence to the fact that they have been held responsible as we proclaimed we would, nor
Mhm.
has there been adequate discussion and investigation into what were the reasons that Pahalgam happened. Was there an intelligence
Mm.
failure? Was there a
Failure.
secondary?
Yes.
So this is one set of issues when we look at our overall national security goal of preventing terrorist attacks against India and making sure that incident like Pahalgam never happens. And separately is the diplomatic effort which accompanied both the hostilities which took place between India and Pakistan, as well as the subsequent dispatch of parliamentary delegations, etc., to various
Mm.
parts of the world. What did they achieve? Did they achieve anything new? Whether what they could have been done very well by our Indian missions abroad in the normal course of their diplomatic
Yeah.
duties is a big question mark. Other than presenting a pluralistic face of India, I do not see them as having come back with any specific gains.
Yeah, even on this pluralistic face of India, in terms of, not just various shades of political opinion in the country, but also in terms of India's social inclusiveness, it does project that there were people, from all religious communities. I'm specifically saying religious communities because that is the major fault line which people in the world want the Indian government to address, given the fact that how it has gone about. But just an aside, a very small little thing. Even this, having various shades of political opinion in these delegations was preceded by the unsavory, episode involving Sashi Tharoor being named by the government without actually being given by the Congress party, and the Congress party also stooping down to the level that of not including Sashi Tharoor's name, even though the fact that in 2009, when he was inducted in the party, it was primarily on the strength of his diplomatic track record that he was brought in and promoted in the party. So does not that take away the sheen away from? I'm not talking about the internal politics of the Congress. That's a completely different thing, and the kind of positions which Sashi Tharoor has been saying. But even that gets dented by not really professionally handling the inclusion of somebody in these delegations.
I entirely agree. I think the opposition did not cover itself with glory in how it went about this matter, nor how whatever was the final decisions taken. I asked one of the opposition MPs who was part of the delegation as to why they were joining and were they not walking into a trap set by the government to co-opt them and to
Right.
make sure that there isn't adequate debate within the country on what went wrong or even whether the government's actions are right or wrong. And wasn't a parliamentary debate far more important? His response was to say that the main opposition party jumped up and agreed to be part of the delegation. Who they chose to go was a secondary matter. And once they had taken that position, others could not stay
Others
away from.
had to follow
They
suit.
had to fall in line. Ideally, there should have been a consultation amongst the India Alliance at least before they took a decision on this matter. And in my view, maybe they could have even, if they were willing to go as part of this delegation, they should have at least extracted some reciprocal assurances from the government on the fact that the opposition would be consulted whenever any such major incident happens and that there would be a parliament debate, etc. So there was nothing which the opposition got in reverse. And to a large extent, the delegations went outside and justified the government's actions or the country's actions. I think since it's a foreign policy issue, you can say country's actions.
Countries.
That does not exclude the need for a debate within India. For example,
Right.
a new Modi doctrine has been declared. Is everyone on board with this Modi doctrine? This doctrine essentially permits the government in power to declare war anytime there is a terrorist attack within the country. Is the opposition willing to give such unbridled license to the government? And what are the consequences of such frequent hostilities or war or even actions, aerial attacks as we have seen, or drone attacks on the other side? So we are going to be living on the precipice of instability. Stability can break
And
down
that
any.
is definitely going to impact our growth and the economy already in doldrums.
Yeah, the growth and economy is one aspect of it. Overall, international image is another aspect of it,
Yes.
but also the poor people who live in the border areas of the two countries. They are the people who suffer the most. I remember one of our former army chiefs in a speech in Pune made this wonderful statement saying television channels stop romanticizing war. This is not a Bollywood movie. There are real issues at stake. I'm an army man. If I'm ordered to go and fight a war, I will. But I will always say diplomacy is the first answer. It is the first solution. And that is the first step that we should take. So similarly, have we made adequate precaution to ensure that every diplomatic opportunity is used before we go into hostilities, or have we got ourselves boxed into a situation where one single terrorist or Pakistan government or nefarious elements within the Pakistani establishment can start a war between India and Pakistan at any time? So I think that level of instability is not a happy situation at all, not a welcome situation at all. This requires much more debate and discussion in a country. I accept that India has not been able to find an effective solution to stop attacks on India, terrorist attacks on India by Pakistan. But no country in the world has found effective solutions for the
To
problem of
terrorism.
terrorists. And if at all a country like the US has succeeded post 9/11 in averting a major terrorist incident like what happened during 9/11, it is because they had created a fortress America. They have improved their intelligence and their security systems to such an extent that at least from outside the country, they have prevented attacks from happening. It still doesn't exclude another incident happening. And we see how rampant gun violence is within the country and how there are racist or
That's
any
right.
other form of attacks within the country. But still, for India too, what we need to look at is how can we make a fortress India? Prevention is the best solution. Going in and making these precision attacks or targeted attacks on Pakistan is not going to make a huge difference. And once again, contrary to the assumptions of a whole lot of people in India, Pakistan is not on the verge of collapse. The government remains in power. The army remains a very powerful institution. And globally, too, no other country other than India wants to see Pakistan undermined, even whether it is in
Right.
India's interest to see Pakistan completely undermined and go into chaos is a question which it requires a separate discussion. But at any
True.
rate, with the global response we have seen to India's actions as well as India's diplomatic efforts is one where, number one, the hyphenation is back. Once again, India-Pakistan equation has become.
Kashmir issue is also back on
Kashmir
the
issue is
international.
also got internationalized. Once again, people are talking about Kashmir. People are, once again, it has loomed large back into their consciousness. But otherwise, there are enough problems in the world, and each country is wrestling with its own set of priorities and concerns. So nobody is willing to come and poke their nose into India-Pakistan affairs, except, of course, President Trump, who has been claiming credit for mediating the ceasefire. And one thing is obvious, the Americans did, after first saying we don't want to be part of it, they did work the phones. They did speak to two sides, both Vice President Vance and the Secretary of State Mark Rubio. And it is difficult to presume that all this pressure from the Americans had no role at all. Trump might have
Okay. Very
exaggerated,
difficult.
stated in saying it is all linked to trade. That is humbug. But still, American pressure was a factor. And more than anything else, both India and Pakistan did not want the situation to escalate beyond a point. They just wanted to prove whatever they started off. India, by attacking the terrorist camps, showed that it could hit the terrorist camps at will. Pakistan showed that it could respond to India when India takes such an action. India once again showed that it could again respond to Pakistan. But after that, it is a stalemate.
You referred to President Trump. Of course, somebody has actually counted the number of times that he's intervened and said that he's the one who actually ensured that there was a ceasefire. About 24 or 25 times that he's apparently done. I have not personally counted it. But President Trump has repeatedly said that these two countries were on the brink of a nuclear exchange, some kind of a, something very, unimaginable kind of violence and scenario that he was talking about. India, on the other hand, right from Prime Minister onwards and repeatedly the Foreign Ministry also, has said that we have called Pakistan's nuclear bluff. We have proven that Pakistan, they have not used these words, but that is the sentiment contained, which has been projected, that dare not go in for the nuclear option. Have we actually, once again gone into a path, which one should have avoided to go straight
Well,
like that?
Nilanjan, I think this is again a very complex and confusing scenario for which there are no easy answers, and maybe
Right.
a little more time should pass and more
Okay.
information should come from
Should come.
within both the governments on the decision making. This is perhaps the first time that such an extent of hostilities takes place between two nuclear powers. Throughout the Cold
Right.
War, the US and USSR never confronted themselves directly. They were always
Yes.
working through proxies. So
2001, after the attack on Parliament, there was show of strength on either side of the border. But well,
yeah,
yes, they did not actually come to a fight, like in
it did
this
not come to
instance.
hostilities, and even Kargil was while there were hostilities, which is also under the threshold of nuclear weapons or nuclear
Right.
deterrence. It was not to this extent where you are hitting each other's air bases or you're targeting each other's military installations, and you have
Yes.
drones attacking each other. In this particular case, one question for which no clear answer has emerged is why did the US change position within 24 hours? Why did they move from saying we don't want to be part of this, let them sort it out on
And
their
then
own,
they got
to
involved.
suddenly a very active intervention to try and negotiate a ceasefire or try and bring an end to the hostilities? Some of the speculation, some of the rumors has been that perhaps even by accident, some of the Indian missiles went very close to the place where Pakistan stores its nuclear weapons, or towards its the uranium deposits which are used for weaponry, and that could
Right.
have, even by accident, a nuclear war could have been triggered, and that is what perhaps spurred the Americans into action. We don't know. But what we all know and what it is useful to note is that both countries repeatedly stated that it was a very limited action. Like, say, India, right from the beginning, said this is a limited precision attack only to take revenge for Pahalgam. We had no intention of starting an all out war. And least of all, we had no intention, or we never had any intention of starting any nuclear war. And statements from the Pakistani side also indicate that they never intended to uh, threaten the use of nuclear weapons. They were confident in their own conventional weapon capability to give an adequate response to India. So the nuclear weapons were not brought into the equation by either side, which in a way is good. But it is a very new situation that under the
Right.
threshold of nuclear deterrence, you have two nuclear nations saying we
There
will
is
only
the
use
danger
conventional weapons.
lurking.
We will
You
not
cannot.
go down the nuclear path. So
Right.
we have to wait and see how all this evolves. It is good that nobody threatened use of nuclear weapons, but as far as the global community is concerned, as far as the United States is concerned, uh, people are kind of worried about what will happen if a war between India and Pakistan leads to a deliberate use of nuclear weapons or an accidental triggering of any form of nuclear explosion. And that risk is real and that risk remains. And at no point can Indian policymakers completely overlook and disregard that risk and say we will do what we want vis-a-vis Pakistan. If at all we do that, Pakistan may also be tempted as a final option to say we threaten the use of nuclear weapons. And once they say that, what will we do? We don't know. We have to see what will be India's response. Pakistan has said that they have tactical nuclear weapons. They can use nuclear weapons in a theater context, and they will use it if they see the Indian army move in large numbers towards Pakistan or into Pakistan. So all these are in the realm of war gaming and theories and speculations at this point. But certainly, it is a very high risk, and they cannot be ignored by policymakers on both sides.
Right. The opposition in India has also said, right from the beginning, that image management, especially within the domestic constituency, has been given greater importance or priority by the government than about trying to project the Indian position abroad. Would you agree with this line of criticism of the opposition in India?
I think with the current government, image management is a part of everything that they do. And that image management came into this sequence of events also. All of Prime Minister's speech, the very attribution of the name Sindoor to Prime Minister, that he chose the name Operation Sindoor, and the repeated claims of victories, exaggerated and accentuated by what is popularly known as the Godi media, who wanted to make it out into a bigger and bigger war and who were unhappy. There was a large section of social media and mainstream media who were very unhappy when the ceasefire was
Yes, that is right.
they
Especially
attacked
the
Secretary
the
Vikram
Hindu
Misri.
right wing supporters were very upset that we have not actually been able to do a fight to the finish. We should have raised Pakistan into ground, should have repeated
Absolutely.
1971. These were the kind of conversations which I was having with people on the right side of the
Right.
political
So this,
flank in
this whole
India.
image management exercise actually turned counterproductive because they became even critical of the prime minister and the government and its decision to go in for a ceasefire. Any sensible person would say war is wrong, war is bad. we should try and avoid war by any circumstances. Hostilities cause enormous damage to both sides. There is nuclear weapons on both sides. It's an extremely difficult situation. So the government was right in keeping the hostilities as targeted and precise as possible, and then toning it down and bringing about a ceasefire at the earliest opportunity, whether Trump mediated or without his mediation. Either way, a ceasefire is good. That is the logical, reasonable conclusion that we can adopt. But when the image management takes over, and people are given an impression that actually we are so superior in strength and capabilities that we can go in and erase Pakistan, take over Pakistan occupied Kashmir, that the army there is fragile, the state is fragile, it's about to collapse, we are going to suddenly, Balochistan is going to declare independence. So then you have complete confusion and chaos reigning over the mind space within the India. And that is what end result became counterproductive in this particular case.
You referred to Balochistan. Now, let me ask you that do you think that in the conversations which the international community has on these issues, Kashmir is getting juxtaposed with Balochistan? And would you say that this is one of the failures of the Indian diplomacy at the moment? That we have allowed that India is creating trouble in Balochistan as a kind of response to what its allegation is that Pakistan is doing in Kashmir or has been doing for several decades. So it is our turn also to create some trouble within Pakistan.
Well, Nilanjan, if we talk about Balochistan or Kashmir, I think what we have to be realistic about is both these are minor issues for the world. There's nobody overtly concerned about Kashmir except Pakistan and to some extent China. Nobody else is really bothered about it. Nobody is talking about it. Nobody is rushing to raise it in any international forum. Similarly, Balochistan also, if at all anybody is concerned, it is India, concerned beyond Pakistan, of course, and to a marginal extent Iran, because it is right on its borders. When it comes to diplomacy, the Indian diplomats are confronted with a very difficult task. On Balochistan, we can neither publicly criticize Pakistan for what it is doing in Balochistan, oppressing the Balochi nationalists, nor can we defend the Pakistani military's actions. So the default option is to stay quiet and let the international media do whatever it needs to do and wait for what happens within Pakistan to develop on its own, to evolve on its own, to unravel on its own. There are various accusations of an Indian hand there in Balochistan in support of the Balochi nationalists. I don't know about this, and nobody would really know whether there is any such hand. Indian government very strenuously denies these accusations and allegations. As far as Kashmir is concerned, the default option of Indian diplomacy is to just state our official position, which is that Kashmir is an inalienable part of India. It is a state of India. We have been having democratic elections regularly. The UN resolutions are no longer relevant. UN has no role. A third party has no role. In similar agreement, we have agreed to solve it bilaterally. So we just repeatedly restate established positions which don't give any room for wriggle or for maneuver or to find intelligent compromise solutions. There's been no serious dialogue between India and Pakistan on the Kashmir issue in public. Off the record, through informal back channels, a lot of discussions.
Track two, which used to be a very important channel.
Right. I mean, it's not track two because it is beyond track two. We have had very senior responsible officials with authorization from the two governments engage in very secret confidential discussions, which according to reports almost arrived at a solution till Musharraf fell from power and everything collapsed. And maybe Vajpayee has talked about insaniyat being the basis for finding a solution for Kashmir issue. Dr. Manmohan Singh repeatedly spoke about making the borders irrelevant and permitting greater flow of people and goods between the two parts of Kashmir, etc. So, whatever discussions have taken place have only taken place in the secret channels, which we do not know much about authoritatively. Authoritatively, but what India should realize and accept for ourselves is that there is need for a domestic debate. Yeah, Article 370 has been now abolished. There is a governor in there who's a very powerful governor who still is in charge of security. We recently have had elections
As
and
powerful, as powerful that the elected chief minister was kept locked up in his house for one whole
indeed,
day.
indeed. All this and what happened earlier, immediately
Yes,
after abolition of Article 370, also is
of
well
course.
known.
Yeah.
I think three former chief ministers were kept under house arrest.
No, but this
So
was a sitting one this time.
correct. That's right.
As far as the Martyrs' Day celebrations were concerned, you had the sitting chief minister.
That's right. So we have to realize that we as India need to find a solution for Kashmir. And that solution
That's
cannot
right.
be a result of strong arm tactics alone, which has been by
Right.
now tried in
You have to take the
to a
people
great
of
extent.
Kashmir along.
You have to have a dialogue with them. This is not a battle over territory. You have to
Right.
win over their hearts and their minds.
That's right.
And that requires dialogue, that requires engagement, that requires a great deal of patience, that requires a lot of tolerance to different sections of opinion there. And we have to do that even as we deal with the problem of terrorism, because the terrorists may not be seeking a solution to the Kashmir issue. They do not want this. They want to foment trouble. They would like this
Right.
alienation between the Kashmiri people and the Indian people to stay. So we need to be creative. We need to be more innovative. We need to be patient. In the least, we need to talk. And here again,
Right.
many attempts have been made by previous governments to try and open channels of communication. We need to reopen them. One doesn't know here again what the intelligence agencies do or whether there are secret talks, etc., which happen. But either way,
Right.
it is absolutely important. In fact, after Operation Sindoor and all the hostilities, the view I expressed in several discussions was India, even now, should open an informal channel to talk to Pakistan. Because
Right.
talking to Pakistan and persuading Pakistan to stop funding and supporting of terrorists, to arrive at a modus vivendi where we can reopen talks, we can start discussing all
That is
issues that
very
are there to
important.
discuss, is the only way forward. It need not be public talks. It could be once again an informal channel. It could be a secret channel, but some kind of engagement is the only way forward when we are two neighbors and we are sitting cheek and jowl with each other, and we can cause enormous harm to each other, and we are holding
Right.
nuclear weapons, and there is a long history of Pakistan using terrorism as a weapon against us.
Right. One last question. We can, of course, talk much longer, but I think, I would move towards the last question. That the competence of the Indian Foreign Service establishment, as far as the officers are concerned, has never been doubted. They possibly are some of the finest officers that one can actually, imagine in the world, there. But in this specific context, can one actually say that since 2014, being in the foreign service has not been a very, in, something I would say that nobody would actually, envy you, that these are the people who are there in the foreign service and they have to do something because of the kind of politics which we have talked about, basically image management driven government and all that. So is it a very difficult government as far as the uh, foreign service establishment is concerned? You have worked in both governments. Your last few years were with the present government. So using that, I would just like to have your viewpoint.
Life in the foreign service is and has always been difficult. One of the
That's
old
right.
definitions of diplomats was that they are people sent by governments abroad to lie for their country. So, I mean, that of course is a very
No, that's a
classical definition. It
yes.
applies to a world of diplomacy long back. In my days in the foreign service, as I was growing up in the foreign service, I used to always argue that it doesn't pay to lie. You have to be honest. Your credibility with your interlocutors rests on you being honest and open with them. If there is something wrong on your side, trying to at least say, look, I cannot speak about this, or I have to defend my country's position, and this is my country's position. Or when something like the tragic rape of a girl happened in Delhi, and questions are raised regarding safety and security of women in India or in Delhi in particular, what answer can you give as a
That's
diplomat?
right.
The
You can't deny
details,
that.
the reality is there. So you have to defend yourself saying we are a democratic country, we have mechanisms to correct our mistakes, there are mistakes which happen, we need to do better, we need to change the mindset of men, etc., etc. So diplomats, I think throughout their life, Indian diplomats as well as diplomats in all countries go through some of these moral challenges where you may not entirely agree with the position of a government or agree with something which has happened in a country, but you're forced to defend it. So you have to try and defend it as honestly as possible, without lying, without being
Right.
honest to yourself, not just to the interlocutor that you have. And if you reach a point of no return where you cannot justify the government's actions, you have to quit. You cannot survive
Right.
any longer in the foreign service. What has happened? So, what I would say is that there was always space and room
Always this.
for
Yes.
diplomats to use whatever language they chose to maintain their individual views, even as they did not let their country down. But post 2014, that space has become more and more constricted. There are more and
Good.
more instructions from Delhi. There are more and more direct orders saying, do this, don't do that, tweet this, don't tweet this. So the extent of control has grown so much that it is difficult to find space to move around there. And just like the domestic bureaucracy, there is a sense of fear or apprehension or a feeling that it is only if you say what pleases the higher ups will you get your promotions or will you get your postings. So
Right.
all this bureaucracy has never been known for any great spine in India in particular, anywhere, I guess. So there is a fear complex which also drives people into just mouthing what the government
What the
wants to hear
government wants.
and what the government wants rather than question it or to challenge it either within the system or even in discussions with others outside.
Well, thank you. You have been absolutely honest, and you have spoken at great length on various aspects of various questions which have come up. You talked about, talking to, sharing more information with Parliament. We are now in the middle of the monsoon session, just about started. We hope that we will actually get the government to come out and share more information with the Indian public, because information remains very scanty and people of this country would like more information, very honestly disclosed by the government. Thank you, Venu Rajamony. It's been a pleasure once again to speak with you after a fairly long gap. Thank you so much.